Books are one of the best ways to learn. Learn to earn, as people say. So after reading a ton of books on personal finance, wealth, self-improvement, topics like that, I've kind of come to the conclusion that a lot of books in those genres are kind of the same thing over and over again. But not all books are created equal. Some are a lot better than others. So I have 5 life-changing books right here. Now, hopefully you can't see the titles, so no cheating. And I would consider these books the absolute best of the best. I'm gonna set these down now. In terms of personal finance, wealth, and self-improvement. But essentially life-changing books that are really gonna change your perspective and overall improve your life. So I'll reveal these 5 books. I'll leave links in the description below in case you're interested in looking these up and reading these books for yourself. And then I'll share a little bit about the general idea of the book and 2 main takeaways that I got from the book. So without further ado, let's dive into it. So number 1 is Maloney's Medical Dictionary. No, just kidding. We don't need that. The actual first book on the list is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Now, if you've ever looked for a book on personal finance, you've probably come across this book at some point. And there really is a reason why this book is so popular and why it's sold so much. Now, Rich Dad, Poor Dad was really kind of the first book that I read in regards to like personal finance, wealth, and overall self-improvement. Honestly, that book kind of made me switch majors in college and study business. This book honestly just teaches personal finance in such an easy and understandable way. In the book, Robert Kiyosaki uses the analogy of a rich dad and a poor dad to help you kind of understand his perspective on money. And honestly, it really does a good job at that. And if I were to sum up the whole book in 2 main principles, number 1 would be that you don't need a high-paying salary job to be rich. And number 2, if you want to be rich, you really need to make your money work for you. Kind of knowing the difference between assets and liabilities, because the poor invest in liabilities and the rich invest in assets. Put very simply. The book dives into this a lot deeper, uses great analogies, great examples, and it's really easy to understand. So if you haven't read any books on personal finance ever, this is definitely a great starter book. It's gonna get you hooked. So next up on the list, we got Leadership and Self-Deception, Getting Out of the Box. Now honestly, you might have never heard of this book before, but it's a good one. In college, I was actually assigned to read this book for one of my classes, and it really changed my perspective, and honestly, it made a huge impact on me. So it really just covers self-awareness, getting outside the box, and principles of leadership. And so what I love about this book is that it does a really good job of giving real-world examples and stories applying these principles. Because I've read plenty of books that sit there and tell you this is what you need to do, but they don't really give you any real-world examples of it working or of how you can implement it in your life. So this book does a great job at that. And 2 main takeaways or principles that I learned from this book are, number 1 is that we justify our actions a lot of the time because we only think of ourselves and we try to emphasize on people's weaknesses. And a lot of times we just sabotage ourselves for failure. Number 2 is that if you want to be successful and beat self-deception, you need to think and help others. Now the book dives way deeper into these principles than what I just talked about, so definitely check this one out and read it for yourself. That brings us to the 3rd on the list, and that is Atomic Habits. Now this book is another popular one like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You've probably heard of it before. It's a great book on self-development and self-improvement. And it's gotten super popular recently. And again, there's a reason why it's so popular. It's a good book. It teaches you a lot. This book is well written, super easy to understand, and opening it up, it looks like this book's over 200 pages, but honestly, it was a quick read. It really captures your attention and keeps you hooked. So as the title kind of suggests, this book is all about breaking bad habits and starting good ones. Because let's be honest, we all have bad habits that at some point in our lives we've wanted to break but haven't yet for whatever reason. So this book talks specifically about a 4-step pattern that you can use to help start good habits, which in turn, if you understand and know how to implement, will help you to break bad habits. So the two key takeaways that I got from this book are: number one, small and consistent daily routines compound and have a huge impact on your life. Number two is that when you're forming new habits, you want to make sure that you make them obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying to do. And the book dives way more into that, what that means, and how you can apply those things. Man, honestly, I really need to read this one again. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie is next up on the list, number 4. Now, as the cover suggests, it's really the only book you need to lead you to success. Now, when I think I was like a freshman or sophomore when my dad actually gave me a copy of this book, but I never picked it up, never even read it until years later. And I wish I would have read it sooner. Overall, great principles are taught in this book. It's all about getting people to like you, to agree with you, and how to talk to people like politics without getting them mad, upset, or just frustrated with you, especially when they don't agree with you. Now, the two big takeaways from this book are crazy important. I have implemented them and they make a huge difference, I promise. And this book goes way into depth on way more things than what I'm about to say. But the first main takeaway that I got from this book is that criticism is honestly just pointless. It honestly just makes people defensive. And when that happens, it shuts them down to process or even understand anything that you're saying, even if you are 100% correct on something. And so that kind of leads into the second takeaway, which is to really listen to people and be genuinely interested in them. There's a quote from the book that talks about this perfectly, and it's, "Talk to people about themselves and they will listen for hours." All right, that brings us to the final book we're talking about. Last but not least is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You are probably a lot like me. You've probably heard of this book before, but you never actually read it. So I recently read this probably about a year ago, and there's some good nuggets of truth in here. And honestly, this is another one I need to reread. Now, as the title suggests, it talks about 7 habits of highly successful people and dives in depth into them. And I'm just gonna list off the 7 habits real quick for you.
So habit number 1 is be proactive. Begin with the end in mind is number 2. Number 3 is put first things first. Number 4 is think win-win. Number 5, seek first to understand, then be understood. Number 6, synergize. And the last habit is to sharpen the saw.
Now, if those didn't really make sense to you, read the book, find out what it means, and learn how to apply it. Because this book has some crazy cool stories and does a good job of giving examples of these habits so that you know how to implement them in your daily life. But besides learning about the 7 habits, the 2 main takeaways that I got from this book are: number 1, there really aren't any shortcuts to success. And number 2 is often the way we see the problem is actually the problem. We need a paradigm shift in our thinking, in our mentality. So honestly, great book. Check it out, read it. So there you have it. Those are the 5 life-changing books you need to read today or in 2023 or at some point in your life, because they really will change your perspective. They've really impacted my life a ton and changed the way I've thought about so many different things, ultimately leading me to be a better person, finding more success in my life than I would have if I hadn't read these books at all. So go ahead and check them out. Links for these books in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it more than you could possibly know. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.